Hello, my name is Bailey Durr. I am a nursing major here at Bloomsburg. This PowerPoint will be about the rights we have here as women and the rights women have in other countries. As far as women have come since the times of being unable to vote, get a credit card in their name, or refuse sex with their spouse, there is still so much. I wanted to compare the rights of women in the United States to other parts of the world to differentiate the extent of this worldwide issue. We are much more advanced here in the United States, making women here luckier than most. But that does not take away from the fact that women do not have the same rights as men, and that is the issue here. There are not equal rights. As defined in our book, women's rights is widely regarded as a category of human rights that deserves special attention. Human rights for women are directly and strongly influenced by how women perceive themselves and how others perceive them. Perceptions help determine our role in society. The struggle for women's rights is as old as the struggle for human rights in general. Some people have always advocated for equal rights of men and women. These are some of the few wins and losses American women have taken over the years. In 1769, women were not able to own their own property or keep their own wages. In 1839, Mississippi was the first state to allow women to do so, with the approval of their husband. Finally, in 1900, all states passed a law that all married women could own property and keep their own wages. In 1777, a law was passed in every single state that stated women were unable to vote. Wyoming was the first state in 1890 that allowed women to vote in all elections, and then in 1920, all women in all states It was not until 1975 that it was illegal for a woman to be excluded from serving on a jury, and it was not until 1978 when the Pregnancy Discrimination Act passed that a woman could not be fired for being pregnant. Then 5 years ago, the Paycheck Fairness Act, an act against discrimination in the workplace, failed, making it possible for a man to get paid more than a woman for doing the same job, just because he's a man. 2 years later, the Republican Party has obstructed the progress of this act twice. How is the United States the powerhouse of the world, so developed, ownership of the strongest democracy, and we still do not have equal rights? Many people assume we do, actually. But since 1923, activists have been trying to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. This amendment says equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. We continue to deal with gender pay gap, where to a man's $1, a Caucasian woman is making 78 cents, an African American woman is making 64 cents, and a Latina woman will make 53 cents. This is why out of the elderly Americans living in poverty, 75% are women. And this is hard to believe considering 60% of undergraduate and graduate degrees are earned by women. 1 in 3 women live in poverty or are on the brink of living in poverty. Not only will the Equal Rights Amendment help where wage gap is concerned, but it will make sure that every case of domestic violence, rape, forced prostitution, and sex slavery is fairly considered. 1 in 4 women are a victim of domestic violence, and 1 out of every 5 has been or will be raped. More often than not, women are too afraid to come forward. They are scared of what will happen if they do come forward, or if they will even be able to get anyone to believe them. In 1972, the Equal Rights Amendment was almost passed. It was passed by the House and the Senate, and it was then sent to the states. 35 states ratified, but they needed 3 more, 38 states, to be ratified for the amendment to be part of the American Constitution. Today, those 15 states have still not ratified. It wasn't until 1945 that women were allowed to vote in Japan, 25 years after women were able to vote in the United States. As of 2016, roughly 66% of Japanese women are now working, compared to 60% in 2010. The hope is that by 2020, women holding senior positions will be at least 30%. The 66% of women working is still far below 80% of men working in Japan, and well below the average of many other developing countries. Women only make up to 7.5% of presidents at public and private companies, and only 8.3% of managerial positions in companies with over 100 Part of the reason for these percentages is the labor shortage. Japanese companies have no other option but to hire women. Then there are 70% of Japanese companies that provide a dependent allowance, a financial incentive for wives to stay at home to manage the household so that their husbands can focus on work. Women are the primary household provider. They do most, if not all, housework, childcare, and elderly care. Wives must do these tasks even if they work, and no matter how much they work. Children are required to have a full-time parent, and that is expected of the mother. Men have to focus on their work and put their company first. As I've said, Japan has come a ways. Long gone are the days of professional prostitutes. During World War II, poor women were forced by the Japanese government to make themselves available to soldiers. They were comfort women. Soldiers also referred to them as hygienic public bathrooms and seamen toilets. At the time, it was believed that if men abstained from sex for too long, they would fight poorly. Post-World War II is a different story. Discrimination based on gender was forbidden by the Japanese Constitution. Although women were still in charge of the household, this is when women started to branch out and start their own careers. The United States is much more developed than Japan, and women in the United States have more options in where they work, their positions at work, child care, how household chores get done, and how responsibilities are split between husband and wife. There are also more women holding higher positions in the United States than in Japan, but in either position, in both countries, women are dealing with wage gaps, domestic abuse, the heat from society if they do decide to work, and the majority of responsibilities of their home and children.